going to get into it. We're 27 seconds into the show, so I'm going to get into what we are here to talk about with our former quarterback. Yes, which is football. We're going to start with the Browns because apparently they are far away from naming a starting quarterback for Week 1, which makes sense. They have probably the weirdest quarterback room. They have Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dillon Gabriel, Shamar Stewart, because we're going to talk about him later. Shedeur Sanders here. So far, Shedeur Sanders not taking as many first reps as those other guys. A lot of people don't think Kenny Pickett may be there at the beginning of Week 1. Where do you stand on this quarterback situation?
Somebody's going to be the odd man out. They're not keeping 4. That's just unheard of in the NFL. So I agree with you. I think Kenny Pickett probably has the biggest uphill battle to climb here. But I think Shedeur Sanders is in a phenomenal position. I think he should be pumped up that they're saying, hey, we're not ready to name a starter yet. It's most likely going to be Joe Flacco. That's why they brought him in. He's somebody who brings some stability, who can run a system. He's been around the league for so long, but I don't think that means he'll be the guy from start to finish. And Shedeur, by all accounts, all the controversy, all the conversation that happened during the draft and afterwards, I think he's handled himself better than anybody. He hasn't complained. He's gone in there with the right mindset. By all accounts, he's impressing. He's played in a lot of different systems. He's had to pick up and learn different concepts, and this is just another one for him. He's been around a professional and his dad for the time he was born, so he knows what it takes to be a pro and how to prepare like a pro. He's got great work ethic, so I think this is a great opportunity for him to maybe get some significant playing time. What I do think is interesting, typically you would hear more about the 3rd round pick in Dillon Gabriel than you would about the 5th round pick in Shedeur Sanders. We know why a lot of that is happening, but I do wonder, where is Dillon Gabriel?
But apparently he is getting more first-round reps than Shedeur Sanders is.
Right, and I don't know. I saw a clip on Tom Brady one time. He was talking about when he was at Michigan and he was trying to work his way up the depth chart, and he said, I didn't care if I got 2 reps, 4 reps out of 20 or 30. He said, I wanted to make the most of every rep. And that's what you have to do as a backup or a 3rd string or a 4th string who's just fighting to make the roster. Every time you get that opportunity on the field, treat it like it is your Super Bowl. And by all accounts, that's what Shedeur is doing right now. And for the most part, he is impressing.
Well, let's stay in that division with the Cincinnati Bengals, who are without 2 of their pass rushers at camp. We know about Trey Hendrickson, who's holding out for a big deal. Shamar Stewart, rookie, is involved in a weird contract dispute because he's 17th overall pick. The Bengals, apparently, they want to set some new precedent with a contract that allows the club to void future guarantees. Let's hear from Stewart yesterday and then defensive coordinator Al Golden.
We all agree Trey will be right? But technically he's still 1% wrong for being under contract. So in my case, I'm 100% right. So it should be a no-brainer. And in Trey's case, I think it should be a no-brainer too. I mean, he led 17.5 sacks for 2 years back-to-back. If I was the GM or I was the owner, take all my money. But I guess they don't operate like that. But
I've been around long enough to know these things. Sometimes they take some time, or they're more complicated than they are on their face. And we're hopeful to get this resolved in the next 5-6 weeks and get him out there. And really looking forward. I love the young man. He's got a great attitude. He learns really well. He's attentive. He asks good questions. So from that standpoint, he's doing everything we're asking.
This apparently is not something that any other rookie is dealing with at this point, not a first-round pick anyway. And the Bengals, Danny, they've been known to, well, for the lack of a better word, be cheap.
Yes, they are cheap. And this is something, unfortunately, Shamar Stewart is having to deal with. Now, first thing I would say to Shamar Stewart is let your agent handle. I thought he handled it pretty well. Like, I liked his comments, but you don't win by speaking about this publicly.
Should he be practicing?
That's another one where, historically, guys, even if they didn't have their contract done, some of these mandatory mini camps, they'll go, they'll show up, they'll do all the work, and then they might, not have a deal done. They'll get it done at some time. And it also used to be kind of normal where a first-round pick might hold out the first few days of training camp. It wasn't that big a deal, but this is prior to the new CBA that's been in place for the last 15, 20 years, where it's so slotted and it's so just normal of what you're supposed to get. It's a little bit more than the guy right in back of you, and it's a little bit less than the guy who got drafted right in front of you, and everything is pretty straightforward as far as guarantees and the options that are in place. I have no idea why the Bengals are trying to set a precedent on this young man. I know there was some question marks about the lack of production when he was at Texas A&M, and he was a combine workout warrior who came in there and really moved up the draft boards. But who cares? Like, that's not his fault. They selected him where they did. Now they should pay him where he deserves to be paid and give him a contract that they give most rookie players. So I think it's a really unfortunate situation. He's put in an uncomfortable spot. You know, you're not used to, as a rookie, having to handle these types of questions. I would just advise him, just lay low, keep going about your business, learn the playbook. It sounds like Al Golden says he's doing a great job of doing that. Be prepared when your opportunity is there, but you really don't want to get into a war of words with the front office, because then the fan base gets involved. They start listening and say, oh, is this a selfish player, which is unfair to Shedeur Stewart. So I would advise him, lay low, let your agent handle the press, the media, and go about your business.
I guess I would just be curious if this is about him, or if I'm going to be a rookie next year in the draft and I'm looking at the Bengals there, and that's not necessarily a team that I want to go to.
Right.
And if that's how they're going to handle his rookie contracts.
And almost every player not named Joe Burrow has had issues getting an extension and getting the money that they feel like they deserve. So it is definitely a organization that has a reputation, as Chris said, that is extremely cheap.
Let's head to the Dolphins here. And look, Mike McDaniel has had success there. He's won 28 regular season games. He's made 2 playoff appearances. In the history of the Dolphins coaches, only 2 other coaches have been able to do that. Word around camp, though, is that his tone is peeved, irritated, fed up, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Are we looking at a culture shift? Here's more from head coach Mike McDaniel.
The football program has to focus on football. For that to happen, there's a lot of things that can't dominate, people's time, which is like, first and foremost, being on time, being accountable to each other, and staying to the rules, and not or feeling very open as a team that, hey, it's okay to call someone out when they deserve to be called out, and for those people it's okay to be called out as long as you change your behavior.
All right, so you chuckled a couple times listening to that. Danny, what were your takeaways? Do the Dolphins also need a culture shift?
Absolutely, they need a culture shift. And I think some of the blame for this does fall squarely on Mike McDaniel, as somebody who came in as a very player-friendly coach. And where he was before with the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, and by extension from John Lynch, and even Kyle Shanahan grew up under Mike Shanahan, which is a coach that I played for, very player-friendly coaches. But those coaches had players that had veterans that set a tone. And clearly, there's been a disconnect for what Mike McDaniel wants to do. Because I think he does. He's a fun guy who is pretty free-spirited. He gives great quotes. He's funny in front of the microphone. But he has been walked upon by his team. They have taken advantage of a player-friendly coach, because when he says, let's start with being on time, that tells me, I mean, we're multiple years into this, that guys weren't on time. Like, why had that culture been allowed to exist? And it's almost one of those situations where if you ever had a new teacher in school and they try to be the fun teacher, well, all of a sudden, at Christmas break, they come back in January and they're like, no more fun. You guys are walking all over me. It's really hard to gain the respect of that class, in this case, this team, when you're trying to change everything that you've been about in the previous, 3 or 4 years. It's going to be challenging for him. He needs to get some leaders on that team to step up to kind of spread the gospel of what he wants to do, which is basically they need to become a mentally tougher team, a more disciplined team, and a team that doesn't have to deal with distractions off the field.
I remember when we had Jason McCourty on one time, and he was talking about Bill Belichick when he was retiring. And he said if you were showing up late to practice, they would still make you come in only to be told you have to go home now.
Right.
No,
and that's
Belichick
who never got walked on. The players never took advantage of him. I do think players took advantage of Mike McDaniel early in his tenure.
What does he need to do this season to earn another season down in Miami?
I mean, they've got to be over 9-10 wins, I think. If they miss the playoffs again, and they see, the playoff drought is one thing. Like, if they get to the playoffs and they lose again, which is, the longest streak in the NFL, I don't think that's cause to fire him. But they need to be in the playoffs and win some significant games in December. Again, it kind of goes back to the mental toughness. Anytime they've had to go on the road,